Imagine, if you will, being suspended miles above the earth, encased in a metal tube, hurtling through the darkness at hundreds of miles an hour. Below you, the world is a distant, shimmering tapestry of lights, or perhaps an impenetrable blanket of clouds. Above, the cold, indifferent expanse of space. In this isolated bubble, you are at the mercy of technology, gravity, and the unseen forces that govern our universe. Now, imagine you're not alone, not just with your fellow passengers, but with something else, something that defies explanation, something that has no business being there, yet undeniably is. Tonight, we delve into the chilling reality that the friendly skies, often seen as a symbol of freedom, progress, and human ingenuity, can also be a canvas for the unexplained, the terrifying, and the truly paranormal. For centuries, humanity has looked to the heavens with a mix of awe and trepidation. The vastness of the sky, its endless mysteries, have always held a certain allure, a promise of escape, of reaching new frontiers. But what if, in our relentless pursuit of conquering the skies, we inadvertently opened a door to something far older, far more primal, something that refuses to be bound by the laws of physics or the comforting logic of the rational mind? What if the very act of soaring through the atmosphere, a realm once reserved for gods and spirits, has awakened entities that now ride alongside us, unseen, unheard, until they choose to make their presence known? Before we dive deeper, hit subscribe and the notification bell for more investigations. If you're captivated, a quick like helps us bring more spine-tingling stories. Now, back to the darkness. Our journey into the unsettling world of aviation's dark secrets begins with a tragedy that shook the foundations of commercial flight. An incident that, even decades later, continues to send shivers down the spines of those who know its full, bizarre aftermath. We speak of Eastern Airlines Flight 401, a routine flight from New York's JFK to Miami International, scheduled for the evening of December 29, 1972. On board, 163 passengers and 10 crew members, all anticipating a pleasant journey to the warmth of Florida. The aircraft, a state-of-the-art Lockheed L-1011 TriStar, was considered the pinnacle of aviation technology at the time, a symbol of safety and reliability. Yet, on that fateful night, a seemingly minor technical glitch would set in motion a chain of events that would not only lead to a devastating crash, but would also birth one of the most persistent and unsettling ghost stories in modern history. The flight proceeded normally until the approach to Miami. As the crew prepared for landing, a seemingly innocuous problem arose. The indicator light for the nose landing gear failed to illuminate. This meant they couldn't confirm if the landing gear was properly extended and locked. A small, burnt-out light bulb, a trivial matter one might think easily fixed on the ground. But in the high-stakes environment of a cockpit, even the smallest anomaly can command disproportionate attention. The crew, led by Captain Robert Loft, a seasoned pilot with over 30 years of experience, and First Officer Albert Stockstill, along with Second Officer Don Repo, became fixated on this single, malfunctioning light. Their attention, tragically, was diverted from the more critical task of flying the aircraft. As they circled the Everglades, attempting to troubleshoot the light, the aircraft slowly, imperceptibly, began to lose altitude. The autopilot, which had been engaged, was inadvertently disengaged, or perhaps overridden, and the plane began a gradual, unnoticed descent. The crew, engrossed in their attempts to confirm the landing gear's status, failed to monitor their instruments, failed to notice the subtle cues that screamed of impending disaster. It was a classic case of controlled flight into terrain, a horrifying scenario where a perfectly airworthy aircraft is flown into the ground due to a lack of situational awareness. The L-1011, with 173 souls on board, slammed into the dark, marshy expanse of the Florida Everglades, a place of primal wilderness, a place where secrets are swallowed whole by the murky waters and dense vegetation. The impact was catastrophic. Of the 173 people on board, 101 perished in the crash, their lives extinguished in an instant, their dreams and futures dissolved into the swampy earth. It was a tragedy of immense proportions, a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the unforgiving nature of the skies. But the story of Flight 401 did not end in the Everglades. In fact, for many, it was only just beginning. In the aftermath of the crash, Eastern Airlines, in an effort to cut costs and perhaps out of a macabre sense of practicality, made a decision that would forever intertwine the fate of the doomed flight with the living. Parts of the wreckage, deemed salvageable, were recovered from the swamp. Engines, avionics, galley equipment, even overhead bins and passenger seats, anything that could be reused was meticulously stripped from the mangled remains of the L-1011. These salvaged components were then refurbished and installed into other Eastern Airlines L-1011 aircraft, a seemingly logical, if somewhat unsettling, practice. After all, why waste perfectly good parts? But what if, along with the physical components, something else, something intangible, something spectral, hitched a ride? What if the lingering energy, the shock, the terror, and the very essence of those who perished clung to the metal, the plastic, the fabric, embedding themselves within the salvaged pieces, waiting for an opportunity to manifest once more? It began subtly, as these things often do. Whispers among the flight crews, hushed conversations in the galleys and cockpits. Crew members on other L-1011s, particularly those that had received parts from the ill-fated Flight 401, began to report strange occurrences. Unexplained phenomena that defied rational explanation. A flight attendant might see a reflection in a galley oven door, only to turn and find no one there. A pilot might hear a faint voice on the intercom, a voice that seemed to come from nowhere, a voice that spoke of technical issues or warnings. These were not isolated incidents. They were recurring, consistent, and unervingly specific. The apparitions, when they appeared, were often identified as Captain Bob Loft and Second Officer Don Repo, the very men who had been at the controls of Flight 401 on that tragic night. Can you imagine the sheer terror? Being thousands of feet in the air, in the dead of night, and seeing the ghostly visage of a pilot who died in a horrific crash, standing silently in the cockpit, or a flight attendant seeing a deceased colleague serving drinks in the galley. It's enough to make even the most hardened skeptic question their beliefs. Now, I know what you're thinking: ghosts in the cockpit? Sounds like a bad B-movie, right? But what if the truth is far stranger than fiction? What if the very fabric of reality is thinner than we perceive, especially in places where immense tragedy has occurred? The reports grew in frequency and detail. Don Repo, the second officer, seemed to be the most active of the spectral crew. He was seen repeatedly, often in the galley, sometimes in the cockpit, and on one particularly chilling occasion, he appeared to a flight attendant in the galley, warning her, "Watch out for fire on this plane." The flight attendant, shaken, reported the incident. Later, during that very flight, a fire did indeed break out in the galley oven. A small fire, quickly contained, but a fire nonetheless. Coincidence? Or a desperate warning from beyond the veil? On another occasion, Captain Loft was seen sitting in the cockpit of an L-1011, silent, mournful, before vanishing into thin air. These were not isolated hallucinations or mass hysteria. These were experienced professional airline personnel, often multiple individuals on the same flight, reporting the same consistent phenomena. The stories spread like wildfire through Eastern Airlines, creating an atmosphere of unease and dread. Some crew members reportedly refused to fly on certain L-1011s, fearing they were haunted. The airline, naturally, was not pleased. Their official stance was one of denial, dismissing the reports as mere superstition, as garbage. Frank Borman, Eastern Airlines CEO and a former astronaut, publicly scoffed at the notion of ghosts, threatening to dismiss any employee caught spreading such stories. Yet, behind the scenes, a different story was unfolding. While publicly denying their planes were haunted, Eastern Airlines reportedly began a quiet, systematic removal of all salvaged parts from Flight 401 from their L-1011 fleet. Every engine, every piece of avionics, every galley component, every seat that had once been part of the doomed aircraft was allegedly identified and replaced. And, as the story goes, once the last salvaged piece was removed, the sightings ceased. The spectral crew of Flight 401, it seemed, had finally found their peace, or perhaps, their connection to our world had been severed. But if the parts were removed, Why did the chilling whispers of Flight 401's spectral crew continue to echo through the cabins of other aircraft, long after the last salvaged piece was supposedly gone? Was it truly the parts, or something far more insidious that had latched onto the very essence of those flights? The question lingers, a chilling testament to the enduring mystery of Flight 401. Was it a residual haunting, an imprint of tragedy left on the physical objects? Or was it something more, an intelligent haunting, where the spirits of the deceased actively chose to remain, perhaps to warn, perhaps to simply exist in the realm they knew? The official explanation points to human error and mechanical failure, a stark scientific truth. But the countless eyewitness accounts, the consistent nature of the sightings, and the airline's alleged covert actions suggest a narrative far more complex, far more unsettling. The story of Flight 401 serves as a chilling prologue to our exploration, a stark reminder that even in the most controlled and technologically advanced environments, the veil between worlds can sometimes thin, allowing the unseen to bleed into our reality. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable possibility that some tragedies leave an indelible mark, not just on the living, but on the very fabric of the places where they occurred. And if it can happen in the sterile, logical world of aviation, what other horrors might be lurking, just beyond our perception, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves? The answer, as we will soon discover, is far more terrifying than you can imagine. Get ready, because our journey into the paranormal skies has only just begun. The next act will take us to a place where the concept of a ghost plane takes on an entirely new and utterly horrifying meaning. A flight where the living became the dead, long before the plane ever touched the ground. Stay with us if you dare. From the lingering echoes of a past tragedy, we transition now to a different kind of horror, one that doesn't involve spectral figures or whispered warnings, but a chilling silence, a terrifying void where life once thrived. If the story of Flight 401 was about the dead returning to haunt the living, then our next tale is about the living becoming the dead, long before their journey was over. This is the story of Helios Airways Flight 522, an incident that redefined the term ghost plane and left an indelible mark on the annals of aviation history, not through supernatural intervention, but through a confluence of human error and a silent, insidious killer, hypoxia. On August 14, 2005, Helios Airways Flight 522 was scheduled to depart from Larnaca, Cyprus, for Prague, Czech Republic, with a stopover in Athens, Greece. It was a Boeing 737-300, a workhorse of the skies, carrying 115 passengers and 6 crew members. For many on board, it was the start of a holiday, a business trip, or a journey home. They settled into their seats, perhaps reading a book, listening to music, or simply gazing out the window as the aircraft taxied for takeoff. Little did they know, a critical error had been made during pre-flight maintenance, an error that would transform their routine flight into a chilling, uncontrolled odyssey through the heavens. Earlier that morning, a ground engineer had performed a pressurization leak check on the aircraft. To do this, the pressurization system was set to manual mode. A crucial step, often overlooked in the rush of pre-flight operations, was to reset the system to auto mode. This step was missed. The flight crew, in their pre-flight checks, also failed to notice the incorrect setting. It was a series of small, seemingly insignificant oversights, each a tiny crack in the dam of safety protocols, that would soon unleash a torrent of unimaginable horror. The aircraft took off at 9:07 a.m., its engines roaring, lifting it gracefully into the morning sky. As it climbed, the cabin pressure, instead of being automatically regulated, began to drop. Slowly at first, then with increasing rapidity. At 12,040 feet, the cabin altitude warning horn blared. This alarm, designed to alert the crew to a dangerous loss of cabin pressure, was tragically misinterpreted by the pilots as a takeoff configuration warning, an alarm that only sounds on the ground if the aircraft isn't ready for departure. The sounds were identical, a cruel twist of fate that sealed the destiny of everyone on board. Engrossed in troubleshooting what they believed to be a minor issue, the pilots, Captain Hans-Jürgen Merten and First Officer Pampos Karalambis, continued their ascent. Meanwhile, the silent killer, hypoxia, a lack of oxygen to the brain, began to take hold. Its effects are insidious, often starting with confusion, impaired judgment, and a false sense of euphoria, before leading to unconsciousness and, eventually, death. The crew, already experiencing the initial symptoms, struggled to comprehend the true nature of the emergency. Their last communication with air traffic control came at 9:20 a.m., a garbled report of an air conditioning problem. Shortly after, silence. The aircraft continued its climb, reaching its cruising altitude of 34,000 feet, then flew on, controlled only by its autopilot, a metallic coffin gliding through the sky, its occupants slowly succumbing to the lack of oxygen. Can you imagine the terror? The slow realization that something is terribly wrong, the growing disorientation, the desperate gasps for air, as the world around you fades into a suffocating darkness? It's a nightmare far more terrifying than any monster under the bed, because it's real, and it's happening to you thousands of feet above the earth with no escape. As the hours ticked by, air traffic controllers in Athens grew increasingly concerned. Flight 522 was unresponsive, flying in holding patterns over the city, seemingly without purpose. The Greek Air Force was scrambled, and 2 F-16 fighter jets were dispatched to intercept the rogue aircraft. What the fighter pilots witnessed was a scene of unimaginable horror. As they approached the Boeing 737, they saw the co-pilot slumped over the controls, motionless. The passenger cabin was eerily still, the oxygen masks deployed, dangling uselessly in front of unconscious passengers. It was a ghost flight in the most literal sense, a plane full of people, yet utterly devoid of conscious life. It sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, doesn't it? A plane with no one at the controls, just a metallic phantom gliding through the sky. But this wasn't fiction. It was a terrifying reality. The F-16 pilots desperately tried to make contact, flying alongside the silent Boeing, but there was no response. The only sign of life came later, a brief, heartbreaking flicker of hope. One of the F-16 pilots reported seeing an individual in the cockpit, seemingly attempting to gain control. This was Andreas Prodromou, a flight attendant who, due to his training as a commercial pilot and perhaps a stroke of luck, had remained conscious longer, likely due to using a portable oxygen supply. In a heroic yet ultimately futile act of desperation, he tried to save the plane, to save everyone on board. But it was too late. The aircraft, having exhausted its fuel, began its final, irreversible descent. At 12:03 p.m., nearly 3 hours after takeoff, Helios Airways Flight 522 crashed into a hillside near Gramatiko, Greece, killing all 121 people on board. The impact was devastating, a final, violent punctuation mark to a silent, agonizing journey. The investigation that followed confirmed the chilling sequence of events. The missed switch, the misinterpreted alarm, the slow, suffocating onset of hypoxia. It was a tragedy born of human error, but its implications were far more profound. It forced us to confront the terrifying vulnerability of air travel, the thin line between routine and catastrophe. But what if the silence of that crash wasn't the end? What if the lingering energy of 121 souls, trapped in that aerial tomb, imprinted itself upon the very air, waiting for another unsuspecting flight to pass through their final, terrifying moments? What if the echoes of their silent screams still reverberate through the very atmosphere, waiting for the right conditions to manifest once more? The skies, it seems, hold more secrets than we can ever imagine, and some of them are far more chilling than any ghost story. Our journey continues into the whispers from the cockpit, where the unseen makes its presence known in the most personal and unsettling ways. Prepare yourself, for the next act will delve into the subtle, yet equally terrifying, encounters that pilots and cabin crew have reported, incidents that defy logic and leave a lingering sense of dread. You might never look at a flight attendant the same way again. We've explored the tragic echoes of Flight 401 and the silent horror of Helios 522, incidents that, in their own terrifying ways, redefined our understanding of what can happen in the skies. But what about the more subtle encounters? The whispers in the dark, the fleeting shadows, the inexplicable sensations that leave even the most seasoned aviation professionals questioning their sanity? These aren't the grand, catastrophic events that make headlines, but rather the insidious, personal intrusions that chip away at the veneer of logic and control, leaving a chilling residue of doubt and fear. These are the whispers from the cockpit, the strange occurrences reported by pilots and cabin crew who, day in and day out, navigate the vast, often lonely, expanse of the heavens. Imagine, if you will, being a pilot responsible for hundreds of lives, flying through the inky blackness of night. Your instruments are your gods, your training your Bible. Every sound, every vibration, every flicker of a light is analyzed, understood, and accounted for. But what happens when something occurs that simply cannot be accounted for? Something that defies the laws of physics, the principles of aerodynamics, and the very logic of the rational mind. These are the stories that rarely make it into official reports, whispered instead in hushed tones during layovers, shared among those who have seen too much to dismiss them as mere imagination. Flying can be stressful enough with turbulence and crying babies, but imagine adding a ghostly co-pilot to the mix. Suddenly, that screaming infant doesn't seem so bad, does it? It's a humorous thought, perhaps, but for those who have experienced it, the reality is anything but funny. One of the most commonly reported phenomena involves unexplained voices. Pilots have described hearing faint, disembodied voices on the intercom, or even over the cockpit radio, when no one else is transmitting. Sometimes it's a single word, a name, or a brief, almost imperceptible phrase. Other times, it's a full sentence, a warning, or a question that seems to come from the very air itself. Imagine the chilling sensation of hearing your name called out in an empty cockpit, or a cryptic message about a system malfunction that your instruments show no sign of. Is it a prank, a radio anomaly, or something far more sinister, a voice from beyond, attempting to communicate, to warn, or perhaps to simply make its presence known? Cabin crew, too, have their own share of unsettling tales. The galley, often a hive of activity during service, can become a place of profound unease during quiet periods, especially on long-haul night flights. Flight attendants have reported seeing shadow figures darting through the aisles, just at the periphery of their vision. A quick glance confirms nothing is there, but the feeling of being watched, of not being alone, lingers. Call buttons, designed to summon a flight attendant, have been known to illuminate randomly, sometimes in rapid succession, even when no passenger has pressed them. Imagine responding to a call, only to find an empty seat or a sleeping passenger, with the call light still glowing eerily above their head. It's a small thing, easily dismissed, but when it happens repeatedly, when it defies all logical explanation, it begins to gnaw at the edges of one's composure. Then there are the objects that move on their own. Galley carts securely latched, found slightly ajar. Overhead bins, closed and locked, discovered open upon inspection. Even more unsettling are reports of items falling from overhead compartments when the aircraft is flying smoothly, with no turbulence to explain the sudden dislodgement. These are not the violent, poltergeist-like events of horror movies, but rather subtle shifts, just enough to make you second-guess yourself, to wonder if you're truly alone. A sudden, inexplicable drop in temperature in a specific section of the cabin, a wave of intense cold that passes through you, leaving goosebumps in its wake, even when the air conditioning is functioning perfectly. These are the moments that make the hair on the back of your neck stand up, the moments that make you glance over your shoulder, convinced that something unseen is sharing your space. Pilots, with their unique vantage point, have also reported strange lights and anomalies outside the aircraft that defy explanation. Not UFOs in the traditional sense, but rather inexplicable flashes, strange formations of light, or objects that move with impossible speed and agility, disappearing as quickly as they appear. These sightings, often corroborated by multiple crew members, leave them with a profound sense of bewilderment and a chilling realization of how little we truly understand about the vastness above us. Are these atmospheric phenomena, secret military tests, or something else entirely, something that exists beyond our current comprehension, something that occasionally brushes against our reality, leaving us with more questions than answers? The psychological impact of these experiences on flight crews cannot be overstated. They are professionals trained to be logical, analytical, and composed under pressure. To experience something that utterly defies their training, their understanding of the world, is deeply unsettling. The isolation of being thousands of feet in the air, far from any immediate help or rational explanation, amplifies the fear. They often hesitate to report these incidents, fearing ridicule, disbelief, or even psychological evaluation. The unspoken rule is to maintain composure, to keep the illusion of control, even when the very fabric of reality seems to fray around them. This isolation, this internal struggle, makes their experiences all the more terrifying. They are alone with their fear, alone with the unseen passenger that may be riding alongside them. These isolated incidents, these whispers from the cockpit, connect to a broader concept in the paranormal: residual haunting or intelligent haunting. Is it the lingering energy of past events, an imprint left on the environment, that causes these phenomena? Or is it something more, an active, conscious presence, an entity that chooses to interact to make itself known? The distinction is crucial, for one implies a passive echo, while the other suggests a malevolent intelligence, a being that is aware of your presence, perhaps even toying with your sanity. The thought of an intelligent entity sharing your flight, an unseen passenger with unknown intentions, is far more terrifying than a mere echo of the past. But what if these aren't just isolated incidents? What if there's a pattern, a darker intelligence at play, drawing these experiences together, waiting for the perfect storm to manifest something truly terrifying? What if these seemingly random occurrences are merely precursors, building blocks for a grander, more horrifying revelation? The answer, as we will soon discover, will challenge everything you thought you knew about the safety and sanctity of air travel. Prepare yourself, for in our final act, the unseen passenger will reveal itself, and the skies will become a stage for a terror unlike any you have ever witnessed. You might want to keep the lights on for this one. We've journeyed through the chilling aftermath of Flight 401, where the spirits of the deceased clung to salvaged metal, and witnessed the silent, suffocating horror of Helios 522, a ghost plane in the most tragic sense. We've heard the whispered accounts from the cockpit, the subtle, unsettling intrusions that chip away at the sanity of those who traverse the skies. But what if these seemingly disparate incidents are not isolated anomalies? What if they are pieces of a larger, more terrifying puzzle, converging into a single nightmarish scenario? What if, in the vast, indifferent expanse above, there exists an entity, an unseen passenger, that feeds on fear, that thrives on the isolation of the journey, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal its true, malevolent nature? Tonight, we will construct a hypothetical scenario, a composite of every chilling account, every unexplained phenomenon, every lingering dread that has ever haunted the skies. Imagine a red-eye flight, a Boeing 747, cruising at 35,000 feet over the vast, dark expanse of the Atlantic. The cabin is quiet, most passengers asleep, lulled by the gentle hum of the engines. The flight crew, seasoned veterans, are in their routine, monitoring instruments, exchanging quiet banter. The world below is a distant memory, the world above, an endless void. But tonight, they are not alone. Tonight, the unseen passenger has decided to make its presence known. It begins subtly, as all true horrors do. A flickering light in the galley, dismissed as a faulty bulb. A faint, almost imperceptible whisper on the intercom, like static, but with a chillingly human cadence. The flight attendant, making her rounds, feels a sudden, inexplicable drop in temperature, a pocket of Arctic cold that sends shivers down her spine, even in the warmth of the cabin. She glances around, sees nothing, but the feeling of unease, of being watched, settles upon her like a shroud. You might be questioning everything you thought you knew about air travel. Are these just stories? Or is there something truly sinister riding alongside us? Unseen? In the cockpit, the first officer notices a strange anomaly on the radar, a faint, unidentifiable blip, mirroring their exact trajectory, but with no transponder signal. He calls out to air traffic control, but they confirm no other aircraft in their vicinity. He dismisses it as a radar glitch, a phantom echo. But a seed of doubt has been planted. Then, The call buttons begin to activate, one by one, down the length of the cabin, a macabre wave of glowing lights. Flight attendants respond, only to find sleeping passengers, their faces serene, oblivious to the silent summons. The cabin crew exchanges nervous glances. This isn't normal. This isn't a prank. This is something else. The subtle intrusions escalate. A passenger wakes with a gasp, claiming to have seen a dark figure standing at the foot of their seat, its eyes glowing faintly in the dim cabin light. Another reports hearing a child's laughter echoing from the empty lavatory, a sound that sends a primal chill through their bones. In the galley, a cart, previously secured, rolls silently across the floor, crashing into a bulkhead with a jarring thud that wakes several passengers. The flight attendants rush to secure it, their hands trembling, their eyes darting nervously into the shadows. The captain, alerted to the growing unrest, tries to maintain a calm demeanor, but a cold dread is beginning to creep into his own heart. He remembers the old stories, the whispered legends of haunted planes, dismissed as folklore. But now, in the isolated confines of this metal tube, they feel terrifyingly real. Then the direct interaction begins. The captain, reaching for his controls, feels a sudden, icy grip on his hand, a pressure that forces his fingers away from the yoke. He pulls back, startled, looking at the first officer, who stares back, equally bewildered. The autopilot disengages with a sharp chime, and the aircraft lurches, dipping slightly to the left. The captain quickly re-engages it, his heart pounding. Was it a spasm, a momentary lapse, or was something actively trying to take control? In the cabin, the overhead bins begin to open and close with rhythmic precision, a terrifying, silent applause from an unseen entity. The air grows heavy, the cabin lights flicker, and a low, guttural hum begins to emanate from the aircraft's very structure. Passengers stir, their sleep disturbed, a collective unease rippling through the cabin. The flight attendants, their faces pale, try to reassure them, but their voices tremble. The unseen passenger is no longer subtle. It is making its presence known, asserting its dominance. The captain, desperate, tries to contact air traffic control, but his radio crackles with static, punctuated by distorted, inhuman whispers. The aircraft begins to vibrate violently, as if struggling against an unseen force. The passengers scream, their terror a symphony to the malevolent entity. The plane is no longer a vessel of human ingenuity. It is a plaything, a stage for a cosmic horror. The entity reveals itself, not as a physical being, but as a swirling vortex of shadow and despair, a sentient storm of malevolence that pulses with an ancient hunger. It feeds on their fear, growing stronger with every terrified gasp, every desperate thought. They are trapped, suspended between heaven and earth, surrounded by the shifting shadows and the oppressive presence, the aircraft groaning under the strain. The very air crackles with malevolent energy, and the abyss of pure darkness yawns wider, beckoning them into its depths. The entity lunges, a silent, terrifying scream of shadow and despair, engulfing them in its cold embrace. What happened next, what they saw, what they felt in those terrifying moments, is a story etched not in words, but in the very fabric of their souls. The skies had claimed them, not just their bodies, but their minds, their sanity. And as the shadows swirled, as the darkness consumed, a chilling realization dawned upon them. The true horror of the unseen passenger isn't dying in its unforgiving embrace, but becoming a part of it, forever bound to its ancient, malevolent will. The plane, now a silent, lifeless husk, continued its journey, a ghost ship in the sky, its occupants forever bound to the unseen passenger. It was found days later, drifting aimlessly, its interior a scene of inexplicable horror. The official cause was mechanical failure, but those who investigated knew better. The legend of the unseen passenger continues, a chilling reminder that some horrors don't just lurk in the shadows. They fly alongside us, waiting for their moment to strike. The skies remain, silent and watchful, guarding their secrets and waiting for the next unsuspecting flight to challenge their ancient power. And so, Our journey through the paranormal skies comes to an end. But remember, the next time you board a plane, look around. You might not be alone. The unseen passenger might just be sitting right next to you, waiting for the lights to dim and the fear to begin. Sweet dreams.